Okay, we need to do a couple of things. We need to add a switch to change the seat colors, and we need to add some user feedback to the seat selected. So let's set up our variables for that. We'll say seats equals document dot get elements by tag name. We want to check out our list items, and that will give us an array of all the list items. So let's see what that looks like. Console.log, we'll say seats, and we'll say seats as the variable we're going to check. So I put in a string of seats and then the variable. Let's do our number of seats equals seats.length. Remember that seats is an array of these list items. So number of seats, when you say seats.length, it's just the length of that array. It's a nice way of counting the number of seats. And let's do a check on that as well by saying number of seats and num of seats. That's enough to get us going, I think. Let's check this out. And here we go. We have, you can add an event listener down here in console.log. That's awesome. We have our list of nodes in seats. Our node list, remember DOM, it's a list of nodes. And the number of items in that is 15. Visually, I can verify up here that that looks correct. There's 5 seats, there's 3 rows. So that's pretty good. Let's take the next step and go in and check a few things. We need to step through all of these seats and do a few things to make all this work. We want to assign an event to each one that will change the seat when you click on them. We want to assign seat numbers, and we want to give the user some feedback when they click on it. So let's get going. We're going to make a for loop. So I made my parentheses and my curly braces for my for loop. The conditions for my for loop are going to be, let's say, a variable of I equals 0, pretty standard stuff. When I is less than the number of seats, we are going to increment I by 1, and now that will give us a for loop of stepping through all the seats, all the node list that is in the variable seats. So let's check out a few things. I would love to know what this is because we're going to be using this. So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say this is, and put the keyword this in there so I understand what's going on with this. And it would be interesting to look at what is happening as I loop through it. So let's put in console.log seats sub I. Notice it's an array, and we're going to use the variable I. It starts with 0 and goes to the number of seats. And we'll say dot inner HTML, and it might be nice to know the class name as well. So console.log seats, sub I, and let's look at the class name. I'm going to uncomment these. This should be fairly boring because they're all the same right now, but it kind of gives me an idea how things are progressing. I'm going to switch over to Firefox, hit refresh, and we've got lots of stuff going on. All these list items have got this is. Every time we walk through it, it's saying this is, And this is associated with the window, which is, we're going to have to work on that. It's got a non-breaking space, and it's an empty string. Interesting. So there's no class because it's an empty string, and the non-breaking space is what's in HTML. Let's look at that just to double check everything's happening the way we expect it to. There's our non-breaking space, and there are no classes on our list items. So things are going pretty well. What's next? We kind of have a baseline of what's going on, but we need to step through things. So I'm going to, first of all, set the name of the seat, I believe. So let's say seat number equals I plus 1. Now why am I using plus 1? Well, human beings read at starting at 1, but JavaScript starts at 0. So to make it a little bit more human readable, we're going to actually give a human readable seat number, and we'll also add the row number. So to do that, we'll say seat number is equal to seats sub I dot parent node, hadn't seen that one yet, ID, I'll explain that in just a second, plus seat number. Now what's going on here? I'm taking, in our array, as we step through this node list, I'm taking the seat we're in now, and I'm taking the parent node ID. Well, what's the parent node ID? Let's go look at them. If you go back over here to the source code, we have 3 rows. We have a list item, and the ID up here is row B, or the ID is B. The ID in the third one is C, and the ID in the first one is A. So I'm taking this parent node ID and concatenating together a seat number. So let's go back over to our JavaScript. We've got a seat number is equal to I plus 1. It gives us a human readable one. Then we're going to say, let's take seat sub I, whatever list item we're on, and take the parent node ID. This is a property that you can look up as we work with the DOM in straight JavaScript on any element, see what the parent is. And if it has an ID, we can use it. If we were a little uncertain, we might have to test and see if it existed first, see if it was empty or not, see if it's undefined or not. But we're pretty sure it exists, and it would just complicate this exercise. So let's set our seats.inner HTML, or actually seats sub I, because it is an array. So here on line 31, I'm saying seat sub I, and we're in this for loop, so whichever one we're looping through, we want the inner HTML to be equal to, guess what? Seat number. So let's go test this out. I don't see any errors, and Dreamweaver would put like a red box to the left if there was an error. So let's go over to Firefox, hit refresh. Boom, we've got seat numbers. That's pretty sweet. 3 lines of code, and we've got seat numbers. Notice down here in our Firebug, it's still telling us that this refers to the window. We have non-breakable spaces. We have an empty string for the classes, but we have our seat numbers. So we're making progress. We haven't got very far to go. Now what we want to do is look at the seat color. So let's look at the seat color. And we'll say whichever one we're working on, seats sub I. We're going to say class name equals seat blue. Remember in the CSS we set up classes for all the different seat colors. So we're going to assign a class name of seat blue. Pretty easy. In fact, the seats are already blue, so you're not going to see a lot of difference at this point. But we need a baseline. And we'll say seats sub I dot add event listener. We're going to add an event listener of click, And if you're doing this with the older deprecated way of doing it, you would say on click, but for the add event listeners, you take off the on, so it's just click. I think there's a list of events in your book, or you can look at it through the references I put at the bottom of the HTML code. So click, we're going to use a function or a method. The listener is going to be choose seat. And false, if you remember on how events work, false just means we're not going to use the capture phase. We're just going to use the target or the bubbling phase on this event. Internet Explorer doesn't recognize capture anyway, so we're not losing anything. So let's go check this out, make sure this works. I'll hit refresh. Choose seat is not defined. Where did I not? The function isn't defined, so I need to go back and define that to test this. It knows that this choose seat function is not defined. So let's make that function. Let's say function choose seat. I just basically I'm not going to put anything in there for right now. Right there on line 42 is choose seat, but I want to make sure my code is working, so I'll hit refresh. Boom, there we go. I switched back to Firefox, and life is good. Everything is working. Our seat numbers are there. Life is pretty good. So in our choose seat, again, we're in this for loop, and we said, let's check and make sure everything's working like we want it to. We took our seat and added seat numbers to it. Seat. Added our parent node ID, which we conveniently set to letters, and then we set our inner HTML.